Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th Canto, Chapter 4. Gajendra returns to the spiritual world. Text 13. Evam vimoksha gajayutapam abjanabas. Tenapi parshada gatim gamitena yuktaha. Gandharvasida vibudai upagiyamana. Karmadbhutam swabhavanam garudasano gat. Evam vimoksha gajayutapam abjanabas. Tenapi parshada gatim gamitena yukta. Gandharvasida vibhuda upagiyamana. Karmadbhutam swabhavanam garudasano gat. Evam vimoksha gajayutapam abjanabas. Tenapi parshada gatim gamitena yuktaha. Gandharvasida vibhudai upagiyamana. Karmadbhutam swabhavanam garudasano gat. Vaishnavis, Evam, thus, vimoksha, delivering, Gajayutapam, the king of the elephants, Gajendra, Abjanab, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whose navel sprouts a lotus flower. Tena, by him, Gajendra, Api, also, Parshada Gatim, the position of the Lord's associate. Gamitena, who had already gotten, Yukta, accompanied, Gandharva, by the denizens of Gandharva Loka. Siddha, the denizens of Siddha Loka. Vibhudai, and by all great learned sages. Upagiyamana, who are being glorified. Karma, whose transcendental activities. Adbhutam, all wonderful. Swadbhavanam, to his own abode. Garuda asana, sitting on the bank of Garuda, on the back of Garuda. Agat, returned. Translation. Upon delivering the king of the elephants from the clutches of the crocodile and from material existence, which resembles a crocodile, the Lord awarded him the status of Sarupya Mukti. In the presence of the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and other demigods who were praising the Lord for his wonderful transcendental activities, the Lord, sitting on the back of his carrier, Garuda, returned to his all-wonderful abode and took Gajendra with him. Purport. In this verse, the word vimoksha is significant. For a devotee, moksha or mukti, salvation, means getting the position of the Lord's associate. The impersonalists are satisfied to get the liberation of merging in the Brahman effulgence. But for a devotee, mukti, liberation, means not to merge in the effulgence of the Lord, but to be directly promoted to the Vaikuntha planets and to become an associate of the Lord. In this regard, there is a relevant verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Tatenukam pam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vapakam hridbhagvapobhir vidadannamaste jiveteyo mukti pade sadaya bhak. One who seeks your compassion and thus tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions due to the karma of his past deeds, who always engages in your devotional service with his mind, words, and body, and who always offers obeisances unto you, is certainly a bona fide candidate for liberation. A devotee who tolerates everything in this material world and patiently executes his devotional service can become Mukti Pade Sadaya Bhak, a bona fide candidate for liberation. The word Daya Bhak refers to a hereditary right to the Lord's mercy. A devotee must simply engage in devotional service, not caring about material situations. Then he automatically becomes a rightful candidate for promotion to Vaikuntha Loka. The devotee who renders unalloyed service to the Lord gets the right to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka, just as a son inherits the property of his father. When a devotee gets liberation, he becomes free from material contamination and engages as a servant of the Lord. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Muktir hitpan yata rupam swarupena vyavastitihi. The word Swarupa refers to Sarupya Mukti, going back home, back to Godhead, and remaining the Lord's eternal associate, having regained a spiritual body exactly resembling that of the Lord, with 4 hands holding the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma. The difference between the mukti of the impersonalist and that of the devotee is that the devotee is immediately appointed an eternal servant of the Lord, whereas the impersonalist, although merging in the effulgence of the Brahma Jyoti, is still insecure and therefore generally falls again to this material world. Aruya Krishna param param tata patantyado nadrita yushmat angraya. Although the impersonalist rises to the Brahman effulgence and enters into that effulgence, he has no engagement in the service of the Lord, and therefore he is again attracted to materialistic philanthropic activities. Thus he comes down to open hospitals and educational institutions, feed poor men, and perform similar materialistic activities, which the impersonalist thinks are more precious than serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anadrita Yushmat Angraya. The impersonalists do not think that the service of the Lord is more valuable than serving the poor man or starting a school or hospital. Although they say, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, Brahman is real and the material world is false, they are nonetheless very eager to serve the false material world and neglect the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation again. Upon delivering the king of the elephants from the clutches of the crocodile and from material existence, which resembles a crocodile, the Lord awarded him the status of Sarupya Mukti. In the presence of the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the other demigods who were praising the Lord for his wonderful transcendental activities, the Lord, sitting on the back of his carrier, Garuda, returned to his all-wonderful abode and took Gajendra with him. Om Agana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna here is described as having wonderful transcendental activities, karma adbhutam. Now you might say, wait a minute, this Indradumna was unjustly cursed. What was he doing? He was deep in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You might say in today's vernacular, he was minding his own business, not harming anyone. In fact, he's absorbed positively on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then, due to the depth of his meditation, he didn't notice Agastya Muni and his followers had just arrived. And Agastya Muni decided this devotee is very insensitive, dull, not acknowledging my presence. Therefore, I curse him that in his next life, because he's so dull, even though he has a human body, in his next life, he'll take birth as an elephant. Balaram solves everything. Yet as an elephant, the former Indradumna, now Gajendra, the Gajapati, the king of the elephants, could remember his devotion from his previous birth. So there he is, an elephant. You'd say, wait a minute, what kind of fate is that? What kind of outcome is that for someone who was absorbed in the meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Now he takes birth as a dumb, dull elephant? Is that the reward of bhakti? Is this what we can look forward to? Being shafted like this? Being lynched? Being burned at the stake? All for nothing? In spite of one's innocence? But look at the outcome. Gajendra is delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, awarded the status of Sarupya Mukti in Vaikuntha, having the same four-armed form of the Lord. And he's carried back to Vaikuntha by the Lord himself. Gajendra gets a ride to Vaikuntha on the back of Garuda. So you say, okay, all that is great, fantastic, super excellent, but just see how this whole situation arose. We can't get it out of our mind. Indradumna was minding his own business. In fact, it was not simply that he wasn't bothering anyone. He was absorbed in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Agastya Muni, who's supposed to be a sadhu, look what Agastya Muni does to him. So what shall we do? Drop our beads and give up the path of bhakti? Not fair, not fair, not fair. And here, where Krishna is described as karma adbhutam, he has all wonderful activities. What's so wonderful about someone being unjustly accused, condemned to take birth as an elephant, when in his previous life, before being an elephant, he was King Indradumna, doing everything right? Look at the outcome. That's something that is hard for us to do in Kali Yuga, because in this dark age of nescience, we're so focused on the immediate moment. How do I feel now? What's happening to me now? Is it fair? Is it unjust? Do I feel good right now? Is someone making me feel good right now? This is the thinking in Kali Yuga. Whereas Bhagavatam is training you to look at the outcome. After all, the whole Bhagavatam being spoken to Pritchett Maharaj, the whole situation originated out of injustice. Pritchett Maharaj is he's in the forest, he's thirsty, and he approaches a sage just to get some water to drink. And then he's cursed by the sage's son. Die in 7 days. Now just think, if you're emperor of the whole world, with all royal opulence far beyond what anyone today has. Just think. He's got his family. He's got his mother, Uttara. He has his wife, I think Iravati. Just think of the attachment. You can't imagine how much attachment could be there in Pritchett Maharaj's life. And then, finished in a second. Just because of a minor offense. Finished in a second. So Pritchett Maharaj, in that situation, brings about the speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadeva Goswami. And what's Pritchett Maharaj's attitude? Let the snake bird that I've been cursed to die from, let it come, let it bite. I don't care. I just want to go on hearing the glories of Sri Krishna. In the 10th canto, we find that while Shukadeva is starting to describe Krishna Lila, he wants to pause because he thinks maybe Parikshit Maharaj is getting thirsty, and so I should stop and let him drink some water. But Parikshit Maharaj's response was, "Oh no, once before I was thirsty." And look what happened. Please go on speaking unceasingly the nectarian pastimes, the Amrita, the nectar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So again, the whole Bhagavatam is spoken in the context of injustice. And of course, actually Parikshit Maharaj is faultless. The whole situation's arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to bring Parikshit back to him and to allow Srimad Bhagavatam to be spoken so that devotees coming in the Kali Yuga would be protected by this literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord. But we focus on Parikshit losing everything in an unjust situation. That is the problem. Never mind that he went back to Godhead. That's very nice, but what about what happened to him right now? It was unjust. It was cruel. How do we understand this? The whole material world is unjust. Whoever told you the material world is just? Whoever told you the material world is fair? That's why Krishna says, Dukkalayam Shashvatam. This world is temporary and miserable. Get out. But we want a nice situation in this world. And we don't understand when Krishna accelerates our going back to Godhead, that's the greatest mercy. And what about Hu, the Gandharva? Sporting in the water with beautiful girls, having such a good time. And he thought he was pulling the leg of one of the girls, but actually it turned out to be Devalarishi. So Devalarishi cursed him. Okay, you become a crocodile in your next life. So this sounds very cruel, doesn't it? Here's a Gandharva on Gandharva Loka, and having some innocent fun, as Gandharvas will do, sporting in the river with beautiful women. All right, he made a mistake, but he didn't mean it. He grabbed onto the leg of what he thought was one of his girlfriends. He didn't mean to pull the leg of Devalarishi. And for that, he gets cursed to be a crocodile. But the curse of a saintly person is always beneficial. Just like when Narada Muni cursed the sons of Kuvera, Kuvarat Majal Badamurtai Vayadva, Twayamochitao, Bhakti Bhajal Kritaucha. Tata Prema Bhaktim Swakam Me Priyacha, Namokshe Graho Mesti Damodareya. In the Damodarastic prayers, we sing about these two sons of Kuvera, how they were released from bondage of being trees and given devotional service. So the prayer begs, please also give me such service, some ecstatic devotional service. Give me prem. I don't want liberation. In this verse today, you hear that Gajendra receives Sarupya Mukti, the liberation of having the same form in Vaikuntha that the Supreme Lord has. He was awarded that, but actually a pure bhakta doesn't aspire for any of the liberations. Having the same form as the Lord, Sarupya, sharing the same opulence as the Lord in Vaikuntha, Shashti, being a close associate, companion of the Lord of Vaikuntha, Samipya. What's the other one? Salokya. Being a resident on the same planet as the Lord. And of course, as you know, Sayuj, definitely not. But a pure bhakta doesn't want any of the other four Vaikuntha liberations unless they involve service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the deciding criterion, service. Ordinarily, a devotee won't accept any Vaikuntha liberation unless it's an opportunity for service. So here you see that Hu became a crocodile. And he was, as a crocodile, killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he resumed his form as a Gandharva and went back to Gandharva Loka, free of all sinful reactions. And Bhagavatam explains, after that life is finished, he went back to Godhead. So you say, well, wait a minute. If Krishna is so wonderful, why did these persons have to go through all that they did? And why do we have to go through all that we go through? Why doesn't bhakti mean that according to our conceptions, Krishna just presses a button and then we're in the spiritual world again? Krishna knows how to deal with his devotees. This may take some time to accept. Krishna knows how to give his devotees the best. He's Bhakta Vatsala, the expert in affectionate dealings with his devotees. So he knows how to arrange for us to go back to Godhead. We think, wait a minute, look what happened to Pritchett, look what happened to Indradumna, look what happened to Hu. But we don't look at the outcome because we're so caught up in this body, this temporary body, in this temporary world, and we want justice. We want a happy situation in this world. Even we might say, I want a happy situation so I can serve Krishna. But Krishna seems to have a different idea about the circumstances that will accelerate our development for going back to Godhead. What is it we think? If Krishna makes everything nice for me, I'll be very enthusiastic in bhakti. Everybody can understand that, right? If Krishna gives me prosperity, impeccable health, a family that does what I want, then very easily I'll glorify him. I remember as a little boy, 5 years old, growing up under a strict Christian mother. Whenever I would lose something, like my house keys, I would pray to God, oh God, please help me find my house keys. If I can find my house keys, I promise I'll glorify you. So we think we've got it all figured out. If Krishna does this the way I want, I'll reciprocate by doing what he wants. But look at the situation. Bhagavatam focuses you on understanding that Krishna is the supreme controller and he's the supreme affectionate arranger for his devotees. Otherwise, you would, just by reading about Pritchett Maharaj, you'd close the book. Wait a minute, first canto, look at this injustice. People are so injustice motivated these days. And in that anger over injustice, they are showing attachment to their material body and the material world. So Bhagavatam is focusing on the outcome. Actually, as Prabhupada explains in one purport, by the curse of Agastya Muni, by the curse of Devala Rishi, the progress of Hu and Indradumna back to Godhead was accelerated. Why? Because normally, in demigod life, it would have taken millions of years for these two to go back to Godhead. So Krishna's being merciful by arranging a situation that looks bad to us from the outside, but what actually is going on is that Krishna is taking them back to Godhead much more quickly than they ever would have if the situation that fell upon them didn't occur. But still, we're very stubborn, right? We say, look, Krishna, we understand you accelerated the progress of Indradumna and Hu back to Godhead, but couldn't you do it in another way? That's our mantra. Can't you do it in another way? We want to be the supreme controller. We're like little children saying to the parent, can't you find another way that I get an education instead of going to school? Can't you find another way? I remember my first day in school. It was after kindergarten. It was first grade at Grace Lutheran Christian Day School in New York. And so all the Christians in the neighborhood who could afford it, they were sending their children there. It was a Protestant neighborhood, whether you're Lutheran, Presbyterian, whatever, it didn't matter, just be a Christian. So I remember sitting on the neighbor's lap, whose husband was taking all the kids in the neighborhood to the school. And I had it all worked out in my mind. As soon as I would see the school for the first time, I would say, this is the school I do not like. And that's what I did. As soon as the school appeared on the street, I pronounced it so seriously. This is like a 5-year-old, serious, as serious as a 5-year-old could be. This is the school I do not like. Like this is a very official proclamation with gravity and sobriety. But what did I know? But this is how we deal with Krishna. Why like this? Can't you do it another way? Sometimes we see devotees go through ordeals, and we think, oh, don't let that happen to me. I don't know if I can handle it. But we don't understand how Krishna is there for everyone, especially those who are undergoing an ordeal. But we always think, Krishna, where are you? Where are you? But the mercy of Krishna is there. Sometimes it is true. The greatest devotees have arguments with Krishna. Prabhupada said he had an argument with Krishna. His plan, Prabhupada's plan, he said, was certainly to execute the order of his Guru Maharaj to spread bhakti all over the world, especially the English-speaking world. There's no doubt about that. But Prabhupada said his idea was to do it as a rich man, become one of the wealthiest persons in India, and astrologers, he said, had told him, you're meant to be one of the wealthiest persons that ever lived in India. So Prabhupada's plan was that who would listen to a poor Indian? I remember back in the early 70s, everyone thought India's a poor, starving country. Parents, when the little children were eating food and leaving something on the plate, what would the parents say? Remember the starving children in India. And that would motivate you to finish all the spinach on your plate. That was the way it was. Of course, now, although my mother used to say that when I was a child, now her tune is different. Oh, you're speaking to all those Indian people. They're very smart. They take all the good jobs. So anyway, this was the conception that, and Prabhupada knew it. So he had a plan, and it made perfect sense, right? Let me become very rich and preach, like an Ambarish Das of today. Let me do that. And then people will listen. They'll take me seriously. And he said, Krishna and I had an argument. Krishna said, no, you do it as a poor man. And he said, Krishna won the argument. So who knows? Who can say, unless you have the goal in mind to go back to Godhead, who can say what is bad fortune, good fortune? as a whole, the material world is bad fortune. But we think, I'm in the material world, okay, some or other had happened, but I want my good fortune. And Krishna should give me that good fortune. Even from the material point of view, things happen, and we can't properly evaluate what's happening. Even when we look at the situation, and then we don't look at the outcome. I know right at the end of World War II, my father was graduated from high school, and back then, because of discrimination, everyone told him, that's it for you, learn a trade. Forget about college, no way. That's what his high school advisors would tell anyone with a tint to their complexion. Forget about college, become a maid, become a tradesperson. But he decided, no. I've heard that the Army has just started the Air Force. At that time, the Air Force was under the Army. So I will take the pilot's test. I'll become an Army pilot. My future is guaranteed. I'll break out of the trap of discrimination. So the advisors at high school told him, there's no way you're going to pass that test. I mean, you just don't have the brains because, well, look at your tint. You've got a certain tint. It means no brains. So it's obvious. You're a bit too brown. Any brown back then, any slight amount of brown condemned you. So he decided, I'm taking the test. They couldn't refuse him. He took the test, and in the whole city of Philadelphia, he came out number one. So, wow, my life is, I'm on top now. Finally. So all the persons who had a proper score on the pilot test, they were supposed to report to the embarkation center where they would board a bus and the Army would take you to a pilot's training camp. So he went, and names were called, this one, that one, that one, that one, that one. And finally, he's the only one left. And so he goes up to the commanding officer and says, when's my name being called? And the commanding officer kind of, finally the commanding officer said, look, we don't have any facility for pilots of color. But my father said, wait a minute, I'm number one in the whole city of Philadelphia. Yeah, but we just don't have the facility for persons of your tint. So he told them, well, I think I'm going to fight for the Germans. How could you say such a thing? Concentration camps, genocide, Hitler. So my father said, yes, but at least they're honest. So he didn't get to be an Army pilot. Later he found out that all the ones who went to Army pilot training were because of a counterattack by the Germans called the Battle of the Bulge. All these persons who were in Army pilot training were pressed into the infantry, and none of them came back alive. So good luck, bad luck, even from the material world. Who can say what is what? You have to look at the outcome. So later my father said, just see, it was good luck. He doesn't see it as karma. He sees it as good luck. Those poor fellows thought they had it made. Army pilot school, the gateway to becoming a commercial pilot, but circumstances of the war pressed all of them into the infantry on the front lines, and none of them came back alive. So, but this situation with Indradumna and Huhu seems even much worse. Huhu, yeah, he was a big enjoyer. And made a mistake unintentionally. He's on the heavenly planets, Gandharva, Upadeva existence, near demigods. But what about Indradumna? He's meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's not causing anyone harm. In fact, positively, he's doing the best thing. And Agastya Muni, who's supposed to be a sadhu of sadhus, curses him. How could this happen? But through it all, as Prabhupada explains in the purports, Krishna is dragging them back to Godhead quicker than ordinarily it would happen to them. But still, as I said, we say, Krishna, couldn't you do it another way? By doing it this way, Krishna is teaching us the material world is not a just place. Krishna is serious when he says, Dukkhalayam Shasvatam. It's a temporary, miserable place. Anityam Asukam Lokam. We don't believe that. We want dharma that leads to prosperity. Prosperity can mean economic wealth. It can also mean nice surroundings, nice material situation. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, we develop trust in Krishna. What about Vitrasura? He was Chitraketu, who just made some light-hearted jokes about Lord Shiva. And Parvati cursed him. You take birth as a demon in your next life. So there is Vitrasura fighting Indra. And Vitrasura says to Indra, come on and kill me. Come on. Let's get it on. Finish me off. Because you'll kill me and I go back to Godhead and you get to stay in the material world. I said, well, I wouldn't mind staying in the material world as Indra. Why not both? Be Indra and go back to Godhead. But as Prabhupada explains in the purports in this chapter, ordinarily for demigods to go back to Godhead, it takes millions of years. So in this way, Bhagavatam is totally adjusting the lens that we see the world through and the lens that we see the events that happen to us through. It requires some maturity. Otherwise, we hear such things, we read such things, and we wonder, what's the point of bhakti? Okay, it ended up great for Gajendra, but look what he had to go through. A pushing and pulling tug of war with the crocodile for 1,000 years. Back and forth. The crocodile pulls Gajendra deeper into the water. Gajendra pulls the crocodile back a little bit out of the water. Gradually, Gajendra is weakening and losing strength. And he finally calls out, whoever is the supreme, please come save me. The demigods didn't come. Why? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out the demigods were thinking, he hasn't called us. He's called the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's just going to die because it's very difficult to bring about the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's what's going to happen to him. He's going to die. Vishnu coming to save him, that'll take a long time. It's very difficult to get the association of Vishnu. So he hasn't called us. But when the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared, the Devatas were feeling a bit, I think we were offensive, saying like that about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he only shows up after a long time and with great difficulty. So the Devatas came along with the Supreme Lord in order to minimize their offense. So all this is going on. By hearing Bhagavatam, we become purified of our attachment to the material world, and our attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead increases. All right, any questions? Yes.
Krishna, 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 Krishna.
Gajendra, he was calling for the Supreme Lord. Why is it that devotees normally, when they go through these difficulties, they remember their Ishta Devata? But he wasn't calling for Krishna directly. And that's question 1. And question 2, why Sarupya Murti and why not Sarupya Mukti and not another going back to Goloka? Why go to Vaikuntha? Because is that what he wanted?
He wasn't practicing anything to take him to Goloka Vrindavan to be a Brijbazi. And he, in his prayers, which you read in the previous chapter, they're appealing to the supreme authority, the ultimate source, Supreme Brahman. He wasn't saying anything about Yasomati Nandana Brajabadanagar. And remember, he's Indradumna in his previous life, who was focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No doubt, it was Narayan, Vishnu. Still, as Brihad Bhagavatamrita describes, it is possible to move up from Vaikuntha to Goloka Vrindavan, depending on your association and your desire. What was the first question?
Why was he not able to remember his... He was praying for the Supreme Controller, Supreme Creator, but he couldn't remember the direct names of Krishna?
He's not a Krishna Bhakta, evidently. He's a Vaikuntha. He's meant for Vaikuntha. And although he couldn't remember his Narayan Bhakti in his previous life, the Supreme Lord remembered. That's the important point. Just like the point may be raised for a devotee. I spend my whole life chanting Hare Krishna, engaging in service, and then at the last moment of my life, at the time of death, I'm so overwhelmed by my physiological and psychological trauma that I can't chant Hare Krishna, I can't call out to Krishna. What will be happening to me? What will become of me? All my life, I've engaged in devotional service. And then, because my mind is deranged because of bodily collapse, I don't remember Krishna at the time of death. What will become of me? So Srila Prabhupada explained that for such a devotee, if Krishna desires, he can force himself into your mind. So it's all about reciprocation. So obviously, Indraduma Maharaj's devotional service was remembered. So even though as a dull elephant, he's kind of foggy brain, okay, whoever is in charge, whoever is the ultimate source, please rescue me. And that was after 1,000 years of struggling with the crocodile, because they're on the heavenly planets. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances or goes to Prabhupada. First of all, thank you so much for giving your darshan in Atlanta. Can you please explain how can one become spiritually mature?
By associating with those who are mature. And as your spiritual development ripens, you share that with others. And then Krishna gives you more maturity. It's very important to associate with those who are mature by hearing. And in that way, our spiritual growth is accelerating. And Krishna is also helping to arrange circumstances so that we become more mature. But a lot of times we don't like the arrangements. Like a child who's being sent to school. We think, isn't there another way? But the parents say, if you want to be successful later in life, you got to go to school now. Later in life? What's that? Yes.
Both of these personalities, they are very powerful devotees.
Gajendra and Chitraketu.
Yeah.
Yes.
They could have counteracted the curse even. It says in one of those purposes, they could have counteracted the curse that Parvati gave, or the Gajendra.
And Parikshit could have counteracted the
Yeah,
curse.
yeah, because their devotion was so high and so powerful.
They
But-
saw it as the arrangement of the
Yeah.
Supreme Lord.
Yeah, and so they look like they took that curse as the arrangement of the Lord. But now, my question is that now they put themselves. One became a demon, and another became an elephant. Now it took many years for them. Actually, he was fighting with the crocodile for 1,000 celestial years with the demigod's calculation. So that means it's a good choice, or what do you think? It's a bad choice for them.
Good, you're talking about Gajendra?
And Chitraketu.
As Prabhupada explained, ordinarily it would take millions of years to go back to Godhead. But Krishna collapsed all that time span into a short time as Vitrasura, as Gajendra. As I explained, we don't see the value in that because we're just so attached to the present comforts. We don't see that Krishna did them a favor by using circumstances that seem to be adverse, using such circumstances to take them back to Godhead quicker. That's because we may not have understanding of the value of going back to Godhead, whether to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan. It may be a little fuzzy in our mind, and we say it very blindly and mechanically. You're back to Godhead, Prabhus, back to Godhead. But what about now? How do I feel right now? Now is going to be such a short time. This is Kali Yuga. How old are you now? 55. Prabhupada says when you're 50, that means yellow light. Letting you know, red light is coming. When you're 50, you are 55.
Red lights cross.
We think, under the spell of Maya, we think, oh, we've got so much time. Krishna, make it nice for me. Make it nice for me to stay in the material world. So the whole material existence is an unfortunate situation. Sometimes it is said by mundane political revolutionaries, they say, there's no right living within the wrong. The simile, how can you be right living within the material world, which is wrong place for you. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. My question is, you mentioned earlier that we have to look at the outcome, and it reminds me of a lecture. I think someone asked Srila Prabhupada, how do I know? Something about how do I know if this is what Krishna wants, or is this what I want? And Srila Prabhupada said, it depends on the outcomes, something like that. So I was thinking, can you elaborate on that? And I also heard in a lecture, we read that, as devotees, everything that we do is actually kind of like Krishna's desire to help us go back to Godhead. So how do I know?
Everything we do is Krishna's desire.
That's true.
When something happens that we want, like if you're walking out from where you stay and someone comes up to you with a pizza pie, oh, Krishna's arrangement. If you're still young enough to be able to eat a lot of cheese. Krishna's arrangement. But then later in the day when you get a stomach ache because you couldn't process all the cheese, we need guidance to understand Krishna's arrangement. Just like without the Bhaktivedanta purports, we wouldn't understand all this going on in Srimad Bhagavatam. So guidance is essential in understanding what is Krishna's arrangement.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I wanted to know the abhideya, or the process one practices to achieve Sarupya Mukti, is obviously different from the abhideya that one practices to achieve Krishna Prem. So, but it seems like Gajendra practiced Vandanam at the end.
Not exactly different, especially at the beginning stages. You're talking about sadhana bhakti. Raga bhakti is actually part of sadhana bhakti. Your intent for going to Vrindavan, your intent is what matters. And your focus. Who are you focusing on? What devotees, Brajavasis, are you focusing on? If you're simply performing worship in awe and reverence with no inclination or association with Vrindavan Tattva, and you go to Vaikuntha.
But externally the activities may seem the same.
Yes, externally they may seem the same. Certainly. Just like in our program of temple worship, Prabhupada has, you might say, snuck in so much Vrindavan attractiveness. What do you sing when you're worshiping Tulsi Devi? You ever thought about that? What's going on there? And what are you singing before Bhagavatam class? Some of Prabhupada's godbrothers thought, oh, he's giving them something too intimate. This Jai Radha Madhava, very intimate song. But we take it for granted. But actually, it's Srila Prabhupada giving us a chance to develop inclination for Vrindavan. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that unless you understand Mayapur Dham, you're not understanding Vrindavan. Unless you understand that Mayapur is non-different from Vrindavan, Gupta Vraj, then Vrindavan realization will be unattainable for you. So think about that.
Thank you, Maharaj.
All right. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Lord Srila